Hey gals, I am so excited to be back again with you bringing Ruth. If you remember last time, we talked about Ruth 1 verses 1 through 2. And if you're like, that's like nothing, we actually covered so much of the history of going into Ruth. And we also talked about this idea that Elimelech and Naomi actually sacrificed the calling, the promises of God, to go to Moab, the land of compromise. And here they sit, and we start here in verse 3, and it says, Then Elimelech died. Okay, that's kind of harsh, right? And Naomi was left with their two sons. The two sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, and the other married a woman named Ruth. But then 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone without her two sons or her husband. This woman's life comes crashing down. And I want to talk about this woman as we go through this whole series of Ruth, because it's called Ruth, but actually this story is quite a bit about a woman named Naomi. Naomi was just as much a part of the story as Ruth. Now, a lot of people can say, well, wait a minute, Nikki. This is a male-dominated society. So we talk about Elimelech and Naomi leaving the calling, the promises of God to go to Moab, the comfort of the world. But this is, if Elimelech decided to move, Naomi would have just had to go. Yes, that is absolutely true. If Elimelech, her husband, said, we're leaving during this period of time, the woman wouldn't really have a say. She would have been like, okay, I guess we're leaving. But there's something that happens here that we have to understand. Elimelech dies. At this point, Naomi could have gone back to Judah. She had the choice now to take her two sons and go back to Judah. One thing we know, and we're going to see in these upcoming chapters, is they really had a support system and community in Judah. But she didn't go back. She chose to stay. In fact, she chose to actually marry off her two sons to Moabite women. And for you and I, we can be like, not a big deal. But actually, it was a really big deal. Deuteronomy 7 verses 1 through 4, God actually tells the Israelites, do not marry people from Canaan. Now, you and I can be like, but this is Moabites. No, Moab was in Canaan. It's like, I am from Bakersfield, but I live in California, because Bakersfield is in California. Moab was in Canaan. These were women that God had said, don't marry. And these are the women that Naomi is setting up her sons with to marry. We also see a 10-year time gap here in the scriptures. At any time, Naomi could have said, I'm going back, but she doesn't. And so understanding this is very much part of Naomi's world, as it would have been Elimelech's decision at the beginning. And here, Naomi's world comes crashing down. You can't help but feel sorry for the woman. And when I look at this, I have to say that choices do reap consequences. Now, I'm not telling you God came out with a sword and just wiped out Elimelech and the sons to get back at Naomi. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying when we choose to be out of God's promises, to be away from the things that He has called us to actually perform or do within our lives, there will be consequences that are just called life. That there are hardships in life that God tries to protect us from, but oftentimes we think that they are more comfortable. And then we have to reap the consequences of our actions. Consequences have been around since the beginning of time, and I'm afraid they're not going anywhere. One thing that I really know for a fact, and only because I have experienced it myself, is the road of deepened disobedience from God is smoothly paved. Why? Because the enemy just wants you to keep walking away from the Lord. It's an easy road. It's smoothly paved. Seems like quite a little road. We're living in Moab. Life is good. And then all of a sudden you realize you're going in a direction that you actually don't want to be in. I often think of it like the story of like the frogs, of how you cook a frog, right? You put the frog in and to keep them from jumping out of the water, you just slowly increase the temperature until they're dead in the water. And that is exactly what Satan does to us. He brings us to this land of compromise, and he's like, isn't it nice? Doesn't it feel good? And then all of a sudden the temperature starts going up and up and up until we realize the consequences of being in the land of compromise. And for you and I think we have to understand that no matter how long you have walked with the Lord, you will always have a land of compromise. I still battle with my land of compromise. And one of the things I want to encourage us today is to be able to identify that. For some of us, it can seem small, even though it can be big things in our walk with the Lord, but it can be things like not getting up and spending time with the Lord because of the comfort of our bed. It could be not eating right when God is calling us to treat our body like the temple of the Lord. It could be not going to church because their pajamas are way more comfortable. Or it could be really big things if we have spent our life kind of turning down and walking away from the Lord. But I want to encourage you, if you find yourself in that spot, or maybe if you relate to Naomi, because I oftentimes seem like I can relate with her even easier than Ruth, is that you're never too far gone from the Lord. And Naomi's going to discover that too, is that no matter how far down that road, that smoothly paved road, you may find yourself, God's hand so quickly can shift you around and start having you head back the other way. And that is exactly what we're going to see in the next verse here in Ruth. But before that today, I want to just encourage you guys to identify your land of compromise and maybe even take it to prayer and say, Lord, what in my life am I prioritizing my own comfort or my own needs or desires over what you want me to prioritize in my life? We're going through this slowly because there's nuggets we can pick out and we can chew on, as God is always bringing growth. He's bringing it in my life, and I hope He's bringing it in your life too. Next time, we'll jump into Ruth chapter 1, verse 6. And it's going to be good as we see Naomi start making that turn and heading back to Judah.